Hi, I'm Maximilian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Real News Network and host of the podcast Working People, and this is the art of class war on Breaking Points. A 16-year-old was crushed to death on the job by a multi-ton tractor. A 15-year-old died after falling 50 feet on his first day working for a roofer. Horrific revelations continue to come out about the common exploitation of child labor in meatpacking and food processing plants, industrial and office cleaning, and even auto manufacturing, including in at least 4 Alabama parts suppliers to Hyundai and Kia. These are not stories from the early 1900s. This is happening here, now, all around us. While we Americans like to believe that child labor is a thing of the past, an antiquated detail of a dark history that is safely in our rearview mirror, the sad reality is that even today, in the year of our Lord 2023, the exploitation of children and their labor continues to be a dismal feature throughout the production and supply chains behind many of our favorite brands and companies, including Lucky Charms, Cheetos, Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, Fruit of the Loom, Ben & Jerry's. I mean, there are kids farming the produce that we buy in the supermarket. Kids making the parts that end up in our cars. Kids cleaning industrial bone saws, office buildings, and houses. Kids on construction sites and in the backs of restaurants. And it is getting worse. As Lauren Gurley recently reported at the Washington Post, according to data from the Department of Labor, child labor violations in the United States have nearly quadrupled since 2015. And if that wasn't bad enough, rather than, be justifiably horrified by this situation and take serious steps to address the scourge of child labor, Republican lawmakers in states like Arkansas, Iowa, and Ohio are pushing to roll back labor laws and to make it easier for businesses to hire minors, have them do more dangerous jobs, and even extend their working hours. As Dr. James A. Merchant, Professor Emeritus of Public Health and Medicine and founding Dean Emeritus in the College of Public Health at the University of Iowa, recently wrote in the Des Moines Register, quote, "Last November, the U.S. Department of Labor filed an injunction in U.S. District Court in Nebraska against Packers Sanitation Services for illegally employing children in meatpacking plants it serves. Judge John M. Garrard swiftly granted the injunction requiring Packers to stop employing oppressive child labor. The Department of Labor has now found that Packers had employed at least 50 children in night shifts in 4 Minnesota, Nebraska, and Arkansas meatpacking plants. The children, ranging in age from 13 to 17, were not fluent in English, and they cleaned kill floor bone-cutting saws, grinding machines, and electric knives with corrosive cleaning fluids. The Department of Labor reported that some of the children had suffered chemical burns and other injuries. Now, in Iowa, Senate File 167 and House File 134 are moving forward in the General Assembly. The bills, as introduced, seek to weaken existing child labor laws governed by the Fair Labor Standards Act by proposing multiple changes in Iowa Code Chapter 92. The bills would change Iowa law to allow children to work in several hazardous jobs. They would allow children as young as 14 to work in freezers and meat coolers, work prohibited by federal law. And they do not clearly state in what other meat-packing plant areas work would be permitted. They would allow 15-year-olds to load and unload non-power-driven equipment weighing up to 30 pounds and up to 50 pounds with a waiver from the Labor Commissioner, work now prohibited by federal law. Provisions for youth under 18 could allow youth to be employed as motor vehicle drivers, clearly hazardous work, also inconsistent with federal regulation. And they would also allow youth under 18 to sell alcoholic beverages, currently prohibited by Iowa law, if approved in writing by a parent or guardian. End quote. All right, so what the hell are we doing here? How the hell is this even a discussion right now? And what do these attempts to roll back child labor laws tell us about the economic, political, and frankly, moral state of our society today? And what can we do to fight back? To talk about all of this and more, I'm honored to be joined today by Charlie Wishman, who currently serves as the president of the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Charlie was appointed unanimously to the role in May of 2020 by the IFL Executive Council and was elected in August of that same year at the 64th Annual Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO Convention, and has served in that role ever since. Charlie became Secretary-Treasurer of the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, in January of 2012 and was re-elected to that role many times after initially serving as Communications Director for the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Charlie is a member of AFT Local 716 and has previously been a member of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, as well as the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today on Breaking Points. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much for having us. Wish we were meeting under other circumstances, but Breaking Points is exactly the kind of appropriate title for where we are right now in Iowa.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's well put because, we got a lot to dig in here in a short amount of time to do it. And I know how busy you are, so I really, really appreciate you taking time to chat with me. And let's just start by making sure that folks watching and listening have just all the basic info that they need about these bills in Iowa specifically, right? So what would these bills do if signed into law? And who the hell is actually pushing for these rollbacks of child labor laws? And what is their justification for this?
Sure. So a lot to unpack there. So I think it's important to start with, so who is pushing this sort of legislation? So there's kind of the people who are out front doing it, which is the Restaurant Association and the hospitality associations and things like that. You have the home builders and some folks who are out front. But it's really interesting. I think just really briefly, I uncovered in the last Iowa Workforce Development notes that our governor's office had helped draft this legislation, as well as the Department of Workforce Development. So it's not just we can't find enough people to work at McDonald's or Burger King or wherever. There's something much, much larger going on here. And I just think that you see that reflected in the legislation because I can go over what it currently does. There's been slight amendments to it, but this is just some of the lowlights, I think, highlights, lowlights, whatever you want to call them of this legislation. It would allow youth as young as 14 to work 6-hour nightly shifts during the school year, and expands working hours to extend to 9 p.m. And the problem is those are both beyond federal regulations as they're currently written in the Fair Labor Standards Act and DOL, the rules and regulations. But in addition, it also allows employers to recruit teens for a work-based learning program for jobs in formerly off limits, hazardous, but now they would be open to 14 to 17-year-olds under waivers provided by Iowa Workforce Development or the Department of Education in our state. It would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to perform light assembly work in plants or that manufacture or store even explosives would not performed in a shipping area by machines. Even if you're not working with explosives, if they're in the building, that's pretty darn dangerous. As you could see in East Palestine, Ohio, or even here recently in Iowa, we had an entire plant explode. And we still don't even know all the chemicals that were in that plant at the time. It allows 16 and 17-year-olds to work in meatpacking plants and shipping and assembly areas. Ask anybody who's ever worked in a meatpacking house. There is no place for anyone under 18 anywhere inside of a meatpacking plant. It allows 16 and 17-year-olds, they struck the word coal from mining, but we've got other kinds of mines here. You know, the coal mines have been decommissioned, heck, probably decades and decades ago, but we still have gypsum mining. You know, your drywall comes from somewhere. We've got other kinds of mines here. And, you know, one of the more troubling proposals does go back to the restaurant industry. And for example, it would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to serve alcohol, which is, I know a lot of people at first blush are like, that's no big deal. But I don't know, would you want I asked the majority leader of the Iowa House when we marched on his office, do you want your daughter to be bartending at 16 for God knows who's been drinking for how long, let alone if they're a pedophile or not? And he said, well, you know, my daughter works at an ice cream shop. And it's like, well, there's a big difference between ice cream and alcohol. So, I mean, that's just some of the stuff that's out there. But I think that what I'm talking about here is if you go and look at everything that's in this bill, it's not just the restaurant industry that wants the changes that are being made.
And even with the example, right, of like, oh, my daughter works at an ice cream shop. I mean, like, by and large, I mean, not even by and large, we already know that the people in power who are making these decisions, who are pushing for these bills, it's not going to be their goddamn kids who are in those mines. It's not going to be their goddamn kids who are cleaning, bone saws and meat packing plants. It's not their kids who are going to be cleaning office buildings at midnight when everyone's gone home. And they know that. And I think that's kind of like one of the big unspoken truths about this whole situation is like, it's not just that, you know, Republican legislators in states like Arkansas, Ohio, and Iowa are pushing to roll back child labor laws. And so, like, it's like child labor is going to come back. Like, child labor is already here, as I said in my introduction. A lot of it is being done by, you know, brown kids, poor kids, black kids, migrant kids, the most underprotected and underserved populations that we have. And everyone just kind of sits around pretending like it's not happening, even though deep down, I think we all know that it is, right? And the people pushing this legislation damn well know that as well. And, you know, that's me speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for Charlie or anyone else here. Just want to be clear there.
Oh, but you can. You are right.
Okay, good. It's like I'm really trying to restrain myself here because I'm about to lose it, man. But like, let's put. You said something about how like the deeper you dig into this, the more you realize that this is part of a bigger issue, right? And so I wanted to focus on that. Like, let's put this bill in Iowa or these bills in Iowa in context, like along with, you know, what's going on in Arkansas and Ohio, right? Like, because I think people may hear about this and they may wonder like, well, that may just be like a sort of legislation that's put out by like some fringe elements, you know, it has no, hope of passing, yada, yada, yada. So like, how much is this push to roll back child labor laws in multiple states around the country? Like, how much of that is actually a fringe movement by the most extreme edges of the business class and its political acolytes? And how much is it actually symptomatic of a broader onslaught to further weaken labor protections across the board and workplace standards, right? And in so doing to undercut organized labor power and, you know, undercut workers who are trying to make a living wage, right? I mean, like everyone knows we're in what's called a tight labor market right now, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time in the reporting we do here at Breaking Points, on my show Working People at the Real News Network. Like that's why you're seeing, or partially why you're seeing a lot of rank and file action. That's why you're seeing people quit their jobs in record numbers, because they have more leverage to say, if you don't pay me more or treat me better, I'm gonna walk. Right. At the same time, we've had the boomer generation, I mean, is aging out of, the workforce. A lot of people died or got sick or are still dealing with long-term effects of COVID. Right. I mean, so this is the kind of labor situation that we're seeing here. And it feels like, this is again me editorializing, this is me hypothesizing, it feels like that rather than, I don't know, listen to the concerns of workers, improve your workplace, treat workers better, pay them more, let them have a better work-life balance, make yourself more attractive to job seekers. Instead of doing that, what we are instead doing is saying, let's raise the retirement age and let's let kids work at these jobs instead.
No, I want to go back to something that you said earlier. Let's be clear, it's not their kids that we're talking about here. It's our kids, right? There's nobody named Grassley that's going to be working in a packing house. I guarantee you. And if it is, it has nothing to, they're no relation to Senator or Speaker of our House, Pat Grassley. Because you hit on something that's really, really important here, is that while this seems like out of the blue, out of left field, this wasn't on my bingo card, right? No. What is going on here in large part is a legalization of bad practices that are already going on. You just saw the Department of Labor uncover hundreds of violations in meatpacking plants of people who are under the legal age doing cleaning services. But this is just like that's one industry, one section. This is going on all over the place. I think there was a New York Times article earlier where there's a girl who's a young Latina, I believe, who's 15, who's working past midnight to make our Cheerios, right? This is multinational corporations that are trying to legalize their already bad practices. And last year, I think we saw the big push in a lot of states, including ours, was let's go after unemployment, because really the problem is that there's just a bunch of lazy people out there sitting at home watching Judge Judy or whatever. Well, like you just explained, that's not the case. That's not where this is coming from. You've got a whole bunch of people who are just fed up with it all. We've had, I'd say, a number of strikes. Our most high-profile one here in the Midwest and in Iowa, I think, has been the John Deere strike. But there's been so many that you haven't heard of. And this really has picked up since the pandemic. It's because people have had enough. It's because they've been called essential for 3 years now, and they get treated as nothing but expendable. And you go to any picket line, and the first things out of their mouths when you're talking to a member who's on strike, they know exactly how much their company made during the pandemic, and they know exactly how much their CEO made during the pandemic, and they know exactly how much they're making. And they know that trickle down isn't trickling down to them on the corporate side. Now we got to help them understand the tax side of it as well, that trickle down isn't working for the working class of this country, never has. But this is just part of the bigger picture of what's going on here. I think you hit so many great points in your editorializing. I wouldn't call them editorializing or opinions. I'd call them facts.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And again, I beg people, right? Don't push this under the rug, right? Don't just hope that this is going to go away, right? I mean, because it's not, right? This is the most craven crap that you can imagine, but they're going to keep pushing it if they can get away with it, right? And if we keep buying these BS justifications for it, if we believe the corporate manufactured narrative that, quote, no one wants to work anymore. And that's why businesses have to seek 14-year-olds to do these jobs. Bullcrap, right? Listen to my show. Listen to the workers I talk to every single week and tell me that people don't want to work. Then you'll actually hear directly from the mouths of the people who make our society run, the people delivering our packages, picking our food, delivering our groceries, so on and so forth, right? I mean, these are hardworking people who are being taken advantage of left and right. I beg you to listen to workers, not to overpaid pundits, not to bought-off politicians, and not to Chamber of Commerce bootlickers. And I also wanted to, if I may editorialize one more time, just really entreat people to understand that as we, as a society that can agree that this is not worth it, this child labor crap needs to stay in the past, we also need to soberly acknowledge that, you know, the thing that is always in the back of our minds, but that we, especially here in the West, especially in developed countries, have the luxury of pushing out of our view, right? Pushing out of into the back of our minds. You already know what I'm about to say, but it needs to be said. Your phones, right, have minerals, are made from minerals that are mined by children around the world, right? A lot of the food that you eat is picked by literal children. A lot of the clothes that we wear is made in sweatshops that are contracted out to some of the biggest brands around the world. We know that this is a problem, but we just allow ourselves to comfortably put it out of sight, out of mind. So even as we address it here in the United States, we need to understand that this is the direction that the business class, that capital, that the ruling and order-giving class always want to move. They want to close down industries in the United States and move them across the border where they can pay workers next to nothing, right? They want to always search for the lowest possible wage they can pay, the most exploited they can make their workforce so that they can pocket all the difference. That is what this is really about, in my opinion. And we're not going to be able to address the systemic issue there unless we understand that this is not something new. This is not something that is just happening in red states or you know, like random parts of the country. It's happening all over the place, and it is happening, sadly, all over the world. But there are things that we can do to fight against it. And Charlie, with the remaining couple minutes that I have you, I just wanted to turn it over to you and ask, what can people do to push back against this? Like, and what is being done on, say, the labor side and the legislative side? And like, how does the Department of Labor factor into all of this?
Sure. All very good questions. So number one, I would say, like, always, whether you think you're being heard or not, you have to contact your legislators. Even if you don't believe that they're listening, the last thing that you ever want to hear is them come back to you when you complain to them about it later during election time or whenever, them saying, well, I never heard from you about this, which sometimes is a BS deflection, but sometimes it's true. So they absolutely need to hear from you in whatever form possible. We also need to make sure that even in states like ours, where legislatively and both inside the Capitol and outside the Capitol, we're trying to raise hell to make sure that our voices are heard. But knowing that some version of this is likely to pass, you know, who knows? I believe in believing, right? And that's what we do in the labor movement. But we have to make sure that our voices are heard in all kinds of different ways. So write letters to the editor, write op-ed pieces. Even if this isn't happening in your state, it is coming to your state soon, I promise you. I feel like I'm out here with a lot of other people who are trying to jump up and down and raise the flag and say, hey, listen, help us stop this thing, because if we can stop this in a red farming state like ours, which, by the way, wasn't always red, and we can come back from this. But like, if we can do this here, we can stop this from moving all across the country. But again, if it hasn't even gotten there yet, make sure that this issue is front and center, and preemptively make this an issue and make it make it so that it's just deplorable for anyone to even want to bring up. I mean, there's a reason why our governor and why workforce development, why I have to look in the minutes from the board meetings and things to find out that they've been working on it, because they want it a secret, because they know it looks like crap. So one of the most important points here, Max, I think, we have the Department of Labor that is typically relies on waiting until state legislation is passed before they'll come in and actually enforce the rules, regulations, and laws that are already on the books before they tell a state, hey, you can't do that. And too often our progressives forget that the courts are not our friends and that we can't rely on them really for anything. And unfortunately, part of the bigger picture here too is that this is another attack on the federal government to be able to enforce on states what is right in terms of federal labor standards. And it's not just about this; it's about so many different things that we see weakened. But it's this is we cannot pretend like there's only two branches of government. Progressives need to realize and take seriously that there are three branches of government, and that our courts are in big trouble, and that we have to take that seriously. And not only that, we need to make sure that corporations are forced to do what they are supposed to do, because we know too often that unless it's at legislative or regulatory gunpoint, they're not going to do the right thing.
So that is Charlie Wishman, who currently serves as president of the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today on Breaking Points and helping us break this down, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And I think right now we're at the stage where we're just really uncovering a national tragedy that has been going on for a while now. But the next time we talk, hopefully that we're going to be talking about how things are moving in the right direction, and that we're able to maybe either, if we're not able to stop this, how we are able to push back all over the country and make sure that not only are we making this a better world for workers, but for our kids and generations to come. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Right back at you, brother. And thank you all for watching this segment with Breaking Points. And be sure to subscribe to my news outlet, The Real News Network, with links in the description to this video. See you soon for the next edition of The Art of Class War. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.